What are the exterior means of perfection? Hi, I'm Mike Mason. This is the St. Joe Society podcast. St. Joe Society is a Catholic lay apostolate devoted to help men order all things to Christ by growing strong in mind, body, and spirit. If you'd like to learn more about our work, you can check us out online at stjosephsociety.org. All right, gentlemen, this is the Intro to Spiritual Theology, episode 12. We are halfway home to our 6-month series on the fundamentals of the spiritual life. And we are wrapping up our last episode of this month, um, which is going to be on the exterior means of perfection. Now, in week 1 this month, we discussed the universal call to holiness. Then we discussed the notions of grace, justification, and merit, also actual and habitual graces. Last week, we looked at the interior means of perfection. And this week, we're going to turn our attention to the exterior means of perfection. And as you recall from last week, these are the exterior and interior means are the general means of growing in holiness. They're general because they're going to apply to all of us who are on this path. And they're also going to apply to us on each stage of the path. Now, there will be more specific means of perfection that we'll look at in the coming months. And this is depending if a person's at the Purgative Way, the Illuminative, or the Unitive. But right now, we're just looking to the general means. And this week, we're going to turn attention to the external means of perfection. Okay, the external means of perfection are fourfold. We had 4 last week, 4 this week. They are spiritual direction, spiritual reading, holy friendships, and rule of life. So notice whether it's spiritual direction, that's going to come from the outside. Spiritual reading, the books and articles and things or podcasts we're going to listen to, come from the outside. Holy friendships, outside. Friends are outside of us. And our rule of life, which is imposed upon us, is outside of us. So hence they are exterior. All right, let's take these one at a time. Spiritual direction. Adolf Tanqueray, quoting Pope Leo XIII, one of the great popes of all time, said this: God in his infinite providence has decreed that men, for the most part, should be saved by men. Hence, he has appointed that those whom he calls to a loftier degree of holiness should be led thereto by men, in order that, as Chrysostom says, we should be taught by God through men. All right. God in his infinite progress is going to lead us to holiness through other men. Now, it is fitting that he does so. Okay, so one of the things when you study theology, whether it's sacramental theology or spiritual theology, is that God does certain things ways because it's fitting, not because he has to. Okay. It's fitting in keeping with what it means to be in fitting is it makes sense in light of what kind of creatures we are. So for example, it makes sense that God saves us through sacraments that are physical, right? They have a matter to them. Well, because we are physical beings. So it makes sense that God would reach us spiritually through our bodies, okay? Because that's the kind of creatures we are. We are also social beings. We naturally live in community with each other. So it makes sense that we grow in holiness in community, whether that's in community in the mystical body of Christ, or in this case, through spiritual direction. So you will probably run across the term spiritual directors. A lot of times, people in religious orders have spiritual directors. Lay people can have spiritual directors. Sometimes it's difficult to find one, but we do need direction from the outside. Now, again, we have a priest shortage and all the things that unfortunately we're all painfully aware of. One of the reasons we work with priests at the St. Joe Society is because priests are spread pretty thin. And a lot of them, like the priest leading these groups, so if your priest is leading this group, he's one of these guys, they want to give spiritual direction and encouragement to their men, but they are spread thin. One of the reasons why we partner with priests is so that they have an opportunity once a month outside of confessional, outside of mass and a homily or such, to give their men some encouragement, some direction, and some challenges. So that's what St. Joseph is about. That's why we partner with priests, because priests, your parish priest is going to be one of the most important people in your life to help you grow in holiness. And we partner with priests so that we can take some of the load off them that we can carry and put them in a position to give you guys good direction. So your priest may not be able to meet with you one-on-one individually, and I'm certainly not signing him up for that. But the fact that he's leading your St. Joe Society group shows you that he cares about your soul and he wants to help you grow. Okay, which is great stuff. So that's spiritual direction. Second thing we need from the outside, spiritual reading. Great quote from Jordan on his Spiritual Theology. Spiritual reading is not purely for reasons of study. It is an exercise of piety. Although it is true that one derives much instruction through the reading of spiritual books, the ultimate purpose is to arouse one's love of God and to intensify one's desire for perfection. Hence, the important thing is not to read many books, but to assimilate what is read. Now, you need to study. We set a time aside twice per week. That's a challenge to study. And study is important. It's a form of prayer. Okay. And Jordan Amam, he's a Dominican. He would agree with that. Spiritual reading isn't study per se. Okay. Now you're going to learn things, hopefully. You can study the text, but it's an exercise of piety to help you love and honor God more. Spiritual reading is something that you do, usually small selections, whether it's an introduction to the devout life or the imitation of Christ. If you've read those books, the chapters are really short. You can read them really quickly. But they're meant in that spiritual reading to nourish your soul and to intensify your desire for perfection and your love of God. Okay. We need spiritual reading. Daily's good. Okay. Whether it's reading some of the scriptures or some of the great spiritual texts. If not daily, incorporate it into your spiritual life throughout the week is a really good idea. Okay. So we need spiritual reading. That's something that you can find devotion to. And like I said, or what he says here, you don't have to read a whole bunch of books. Just grab one and work through it for a year. Okay. You don't need to read big sections of it. The idea is that you read enough of it to give yourself something to think about. And especially if you read these in the morning, it kind of sticks with you all day long, which I found. All right. So that's second. So we have spiritual direction, spiritual reading. Third thing, holy friendships. Okay. We need to be friends with men who have a common goal in life as we do. Sirach chapter 6, verse 14 through 16 says this: a faithful friend is a sturdy shelter. He that has found one has found a treasure. There's nothing so precious as a faithful friend, and no scales can measure his excellence. A faithful friend is an elixir of life, and those who fear the Lord will find him. We need holy friendships, men. Need holy friendships. Catholicism is not a loner sport. Becoming a good, virtuous man, not a loner sport. Men need other men. They need friendships in their lives. Part of the reason for establishing St. Joe Society is so that you can find like-minded men in your parish and in your community to build friendships. Okay. Friendships that are built around the most important things of life, namely faith and holiness. Okay. When you get a group of guys together committed to one another and to our Lord to grow in holiness, some real awesome friendships can emerge from that. And there's a book by Sebastian Junger. I've talked about this in other podcast episodes if you are in the habit of listening to some of our Friday episodes. But Sebastian Junger wrote a book called Tribe. Now, Sebastian Junger made a documentary called Restrepo, Restrepo. He lived with an army platoon in the Korangal Valley in Afghanistan for a year and made a video about that experience. Really good documentary. So if you got some night where bad weather or something, be a good one for you. All right. He said with these guys there, of course, they're in combat, they're getting shot at, they're having to shoot people, they want out. What he noticed is they all leave. He catches up with these guys a year later and they want to go back. Okay. Now, the point he makes in this book is that the men did not miss the combat. Nobody likes being shot at or killing people. These guys weren't psychos. But they missed the intense bond created by the combat. Well, this motivated Sebastian to write a book called Tribe. Now, Tribe's a short book. Probably find it on Amazon for pretty cheap. It's definitely worth the read. In this book, what he discovers and argues for is that men, human beings in general, but particularly men, thrive in small, cohesive, hierarchical groups that face a common enemy, kind of like an army platoon. Okay. So we thrive in groups that are small and cohesive. They need to be hierarchical and you need to have a common enemy. Reading this book and meditating on this more is also what inspired me to set up St. Joe Society the way I did. Okay. Our groups are hierarchical. Most men's groups, I think all of them, are led by other men. We don't do that here. The priest leads the group. Okay. He's the one that God has put, he's the shepherd of the souls of the men in the parish. So we enlist, okay, enlist the wrong word. We reach out to priests who want to form their men and encourage them and remind them of what they already know. And that's that they're the father of the parish. Okay. Then priests will form a small group of guys and under a rule of life in the face of a common enemy. Well, what's our common enemy? Well, it's a lot, but in short, it's the world, the flesh, and the devil, right? It's temptations of pleasure, that's the flesh. It's temptations to live for this world, not the next one. That's temptations of the world. And it's the devil's a real enemy. So we are facing a real enemy and we have to fight. And so the priest gets his small, cohesive group of men around him to face a common enemy and grow in holiness. Okay. You need holy friendships, men. So be thankful that you're in a St. Joseph Society group. Be thankful you're surrounded by men who want to be good men and holy men and strong in mind, body, and spirit, and pour into it. All right. Fourth, so what do we have so far? Spiritual direction, spiritual reading, and holy friendships. Fourth and final, a rule of life. And this is one of the key points of St. Joseph Society groups. Okay. A rule of life helps one order all things to Christ, just like we say in our mission statement. Now, when you have a rule of life must be observed in a Christian manner. A rule of life is not a bunch of rules. Okay. I should back up for a second. A rule of life is not a bunch of rules. Okay. It's not a list that you just click things off. What a rule of life is, it's ordering one's life to a goal. Okay. So a professional athlete can have a rule. He lives a certain way to achieve a goal, be an excellent in sports. Someone in grad school can have a rule of life, right? Ordering his life so he can study and become a doctor, a lawyer, or businessman, or whatever. Okay. A rule of life is when you set your life up for a common goal. When I say a rule of life here, that's what I'm talking about. The goal of our lives is to grow in holiness. The goal in our lives is to become saints. We need to set our life up in that way so that all things we do are ordered towards Jesus Christ and growing in holiness. Well, a rule of life must be observed in a Christian manner. Namely, a rule should be followed to do the will of God and express our love to Him. So we follow a rule of life because we love God and we want to do His will. Our motivating needs to be charity, okay? Love of God. Second, a rule of life must be firm and flexible at once, especially for lay people like us. We spent a lot of time, literally years before we started working with priests, to design the rule of life that we gave you guys. It's simple, okay? It's firm and it's flexible, okay? It's simple, strong in mind, body, and spirit, right? Exercise 3 times a week, mortify in the flesh, okay? Discipline the flesh. Study twice a week, growing strong in mind. Daily prayer regimen, strong in spirit. The rules, we have benchmarks that are very clear. You either do them or you don't, which is good. Also, our rules written so that it's flexible. So you have to exercise 3 times a week. There's 7 days in the week. How you move that around your business. What exercise you do, that's your business, okay? Study, reading books is the best way to go about it. Maybe you're real busy right now and the best you can do is listen to podcasts in your car. That's fine. But twice a week, set time aside intentionally. And then our prayer routine. Of course, we want to pray in the morning, midday, and evening prayers. We keep them pretty short, okay? So that not to do the bare minimum, but to have a foundation of prayer to grow in holiness so that as you start to deepen your prayer life, God can expand it, okay? That's why we set up the rule we did. Now, why should you practice this rule of life? First, it helps you to make better use of your time. Okay, we waste a lot of time when we're not focused. A rule is going to help you make better use of your time. Second, it enables you to supernaturalize all your actions. When you practice a rule, what ends up happening is everything you're doing throughout the day, even the quote unquote secular stuff, becomes things ordered towards Christ and growing in holiness. Okay. So what a rule does is it makes your whole life intentional. And then third, it gives you a program of sanctification. So when someone asks you, what are you doing to grow in your faith? You'll be able to articulate it. I do this morning prayer. I do this midday prayer. I do these evening prayers. I'm trying to pray my rosary, either full thing or partially throughout the day. Trying to get in front of the Blessed Sacrament once a week. hitting the mass, try to get the, things like that. Okay. It gives you a program of sanctification. So, what's the application this week? Okay. Keep the rule. All right. Stick to it, fellas. It's there to help you. So, sit under your priest's leadership, spiritual direction in your monthly meetings twice a week. Okay. Or more. Spiritual reading. Guys, make connections with the guys in your group, create a bond together to grow in holiness, and finally, keep the rule. All right. That's it. We are halfway through this series. Looking forward to turning our attention to the Purgative Way next time, but we will stop there. So I hope you guys have a blessed week. I'll see you next time. God bless.